Oh, gotcha. Yeah, this is our first one of these, so I'm really not sure about the format, but I guess if folks have building questions, by all means start posting them and we can get them over to the team when they get back from coffee. I cannot hear you, Marco. Yeah, I too cannot hear you off mute. I think it's funny that it's protocol engineering office hours and I'm the one on stage. Uh, does anyone have any questions about the HVM or ZK provability? I can try. Oh, thank God, John's here. Alright.
Well,
I was the only person on stage. I was like, does anyone want to ask me about ZK provability?
I was just here to ask you questions.
Oh shit, that's not great.
Mic check, mic check.
There we go. All right, so we are well, the protocol engineering team and their their sidekick slash mascot me is here to answer any of your building questions. So anyone who's got anything, by all means, ask away.
And just for the record, any question that has to do with when something is coming out is out of scope. Any because we're you've got the wrong people to answer that. Any question about fuck, what was I thinking?
Anything not building
Yes,
or
this is about building.
creating.
Thank
If
you.
it's Yes, if it's not building or creating, this is not the space for it. If you have any questions regarding building or creating, something that you want to do, something you're curious about, if it's coming to
First,
the network, stuff you'd like to see, anything like that. But any when questions will be ignored and ridiculed.
yes, that too. Or if you're doing something and you're, have a question about it, like why does some smart contract thing not do what you think it does? Why is it a stupid idea to write your code in Rust or whatever? Why Java's a mistake? I don't know. Oh, Max isn't here. Why'd I bother with that?
Oh, I think I want to learn Python. Is that stupid?
Python is still a
That's
I
bait,
did
is
what?
what that is.
I heard it was a good starter language. So like, if not Python, can you reco a good starter language?
I still think Python is actually a pretty reasonable like starter language, and like if you want to play with data or any shit like that, Python is still my go-to.
Okay.
I mean, I wish there was a better choice, but you know,
Go is a better choice.
Go is a better choice for more serious work. But
Literally everything.
if you're doing quick data stuff, I still go with Python.
Yeah, but Python moves to production. And
That
then,
is a yes. When Python gets to production, there are other
which
things.
it invariably does when you build something. And then you only have tiers left.
I mean, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I had Perl code in production as far as late as when we were doing block cloud. So
I'm gonna at here, people.
we're single lines
I
of
think that
prose.
everybody should learn 6502. I don't think that a day goes by then when I'm writing some code where I do not draw a lesson from that amazingly little chip.
All right.
We
I
do, we
just
do need to
pinged
promote some
as-
folks onto stage, like Max is here and Joshua's here.
Joshua's not allowed on the stage.
Yeah, there's an embargo.
I can deal with that.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey.
Yeah. Max, however, does need to be here, but yeah, Joshua, Discord hates him.
Max needs to be embargoed differently. No Z words.
Very little knowledge proofs. No Z's in that, right? Perfect.
Nope, you're good.
Fun fact while we're waiting, the way SP1 does very little knowledge proofs, you actually don't need to have a blinding factor to verify proofs, so they're actually not required to be zero knowledge, technically.
Limited knowledge.
Yes.
All right. Uh, I see one question come in. It's not really building related, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you guys don't mind. Um, I mean, it's in the ballpark of building because you would need a reasonable computer to do cool shit. All right. So, what do you think about computer chips slash memory prices not going down, and some companies still saying they are struggling?
Geez. I mean, yeah. God knows. I think we'll see memory prices go down sometime this year, but it's yeah. I was looking for a RAM upgrade for one of the machines I use for testing all the ZK proving stuff I'm working on, and it was $1,200 for a 96 gig kit, which is insane.
All right. Folks in the audience, this is we may just be sitting here for a while because this is kind of your stage. Anything building related, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we really don't have much of an agenda. Other than the team is here to answer your questions. I do see one more. Oh, it's from Joshua from Australia. How does floating point math work in computers?
Rick, you have to remember, in Australia, I think they flip the order of the numbers or something because it's in the southern hemisphere. So take that
Oh,
into
right.
account. Take that into account with your answer.
Yeah, it's called the Australian complement.
Does floating point math work in computers? I don't even understand what that means. Um, but yeah, that's Josh's question. I feel like he knows the answer. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll do a Teach Rick crypto, Teach Rick FP.
What
Oh,
what
man.
is that exactly?
Floating points, decimals, so how you handle non-integer numbers.
Oh, okay.
So numbers that are not exact. Integers are, nice, beautiful things that just are. Floating points have all sorts of, rounding and other horrible bullshit. But you need them. Also, they're a terrible idea for money, so it is very annoying that some languages, JavaScript, don't have real integer types.
Alpha, I don't think we can talk about Monero's ring signature because that doesn't pertain to building on the Hemi network. But thank you, regardless. If anyone has any questions, I'm just gonna keep repeating myself. Um, all right. Well, Josh has to ask it. So, okay, gang, can you talk about Monero's ring signature? How does this really work? How you know which wallet is whose?
JCB, are you familiar with Monero's underlying cryptography? It's been a long time since I looked at it.
I was a long time ago. I mean, I'd start with that. The whole point is you don't know whose wallet is whose. You know your wallet and you know where you're sending, and you're not supposed to know other things than that. And part of the idea for ring signature, which is why I think it was better than the way Zcash did it, is that it's not opt-in. So all transactions share the same amount of, privacy. That way, when you're so normally think about like Bitcoin or Hemi or anything else and this doesn't go into the actual cryptography, but it still goes into one of the underlying principles because I forgot all of that years ago. Marco might still remember that, but I forget everything. The part of the ring signature idea is that it's not a single signature. You don't evaluate you don't evaluate one signature at a time. You have a batch of them that get signed together to sort of obscure what's going on with the rest of them. And yes, I know they had some improvement for it, which is also part of along the idea of their for mining, that they upgrade the algorithm periodically, and that's one of the things that goes into their ASIC resistance, which is also a really cool thing. Whether you think it's the right way or not is a different thing, but it is very cool that they do it. Because Monero is the only meaningful crypto that you can still mine without an ASIC or a GPU. Although I don't want to tell you how few hashes per second my Raspberry Pis get, but I do have some Raspberry Pis that do Monero mining just for fun around here.
Didn't one of those melt the case it's in?
Not the whole case, just part of it.
Oh, well, that's fine then. No worries.
Yeah. But yes, it was in a 3D printed case, and apparently it gets a little hotter than the PLA likes. I'm impressed that the Raspberry Pi was able to keep running while that was happening. Like that's more reliable than the old ones used to be.
All right. For current, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say years and years ago, a friend of mine that I went to grad school with cracked his kitchen table doing N-body simulations on his Dell laptop.
Jeez.
His wife was very, very unamused.
For any builders currently in the audience, I know Alpha's here. If you guys have specific questions regarding your projects. Oh, Alpha just dropped something in. I don't really know the exact context, but let's go for it. Is there any way we can do instant transactions in game without clicking on confirm on the wallet without EVM? Uh, for instance, Minecraft, you go into an area, it instantly sends tickets, sends data to the blockchain, then we proceed from there. I'm not 100% sure if we need further clarity on that, or if you guys can answer.
So high level, not on Hemi. There's no, instant confirmations. You have to wait until a transaction's in a block and then it's confirmed and part of the chain. You could build theoretically an L3 network that does faster confirmation. So if you wanted, run a centralized sequencer and it confirms things every 100 milliseconds or whatever, you could build that. If you wanted to get really fancy, you could do, and this is not something I'd recommend for general blockchain architecture, but maybe for a game it makes sense. You could do or pull some of the ideas from the old directed acyclic graph or DAG architectures where there's no concept of blocks and transactions are sort of depending on how you build it, but confirmed by other transactions building on and acknowledging them. So there's architectures you could build that do quote unquote instant confirmations, but it's there's a reason the industry moved on from DAGs and is back to just regular blocks that confirm transactions.
All right. Hope that answered your question, Alpha. Does anyone have anything else? I'm looking at the chat. I'm not seeing anything new come through. Oh, Josh has a couple questions on deck. We are just waiting for them to get teed up. Excuse me. Answer Alex questions. First episode of Teacher at Crypto is basically what is money? It's about the fundamentals of and concepts of money and how that pertains to blockchain. Is that accurate, John? Would you say?
Yeah, I think
Sweet.
that covers it well.
All right. We do have some leftover midweek with Max questions that kind of pertain to building at least. So what the hell? Why not? We had him in the hopper regardless. As Hemi transitions from OpGeth to the Rust-based OpReth, a subject that you guys may or may not be familiar with, what what additional features will come to Hemi as part of this migration? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Initially, none. So the first version is going to be just pure compatibility of you can use OpReth in place of OpGeth, and everything works the same. Part of the OpReth transition is we're integrating Oxygen, which is our new Bitcoin, initially ZK focused Bitcoin indexer, but now being repurposed, and that gives additional access to interesting Bitcoin data. So we're going to be adding some HVM precompiles that, again, not initially with OpReth, but with a future upgrade that's sort of part of the OpReth transition sets the stage for to add the ability to get things like Bitcoin fee market percentiles more efficiently than if you were to just do it with HVM precompile calls that are currently available, which would be possible but very expensive. Adding some things for, again, in the future, but meta protocol indexing. So Marco's working on some interesting things with currently ordinals, but could be expanded to other Bitcoin meta protocols. So we're going to be at some point adding indexing for meta protocol data and exposing that in the HVM as well. So you can all precompiles and get information about specific Satoshis, where they've been, being able to look at, for example, BRC20 mintage and movement information, things like that. We're also going to be adding in precompiles that let you access Bitcoin UTXO information more efficiently. So the current one gives you access to whether a transaction spent or not, and then pagination for UTXOs that are owned by a script hash. But we're going to be improving that to let you query UTXOs for addresses starting from oldest to newest or newest to oldest with pagination. So there's some. Again, it mostly focuses on kind of weird edge case uses, but it enables some cool new applications that you could build with HVM. And then the big thing is actually being able to do ZK provability, which right now with the Bitcoin indexer we have embedded in the HVM with TBC, there's no efficient way to ZK prove state transitions of that indexed Bitcoin state that you can pull out of Bitcoin and query from the HVM, but you can't ZK prove. So one of the op-reth improvements when we do require the switch to Oxygen is going to be making all of that Bitcoin state authenticatable. So you can, from a cryptography perspective, you can authenticate any query against that data set very efficiently. And that may open some other cool cross-chain use cases. So being able to kind of use HVM with a ZK proof of data, but being able to use HVM on other chains other than Hemi 2, which could enable some other cool Bitcoin interoperability technologies, but we'll see what people build around it.
All right. Actually, there is a follow-up to HVM. Excuse me. How does the Hemi virtual machine differ from a standard EVM Ethereum virtual machine in its treatment of Bitcoin state?
Good question. So it's fully backwards compatible. So anything that you do on an EVM network, you can do on Hemi, and smart contracts work exactly like you'd expect. But what we added is a embedded Bitcoin node. And so it's basically a full Bitcoin node that runs quote unquote inside the EVM. And we have precompile calls that let you, from a smart contract, call those precompile calls to get information from that index Bitcoin node and then use that in your smart contract's execution. So you can get raw transaction data from a TXID. You can get UTXOs, see what transactions are spent or not, balances of addresses, things like that. So it's basically, think of HVM as EVM plus access to a fully indexed Bitcoin node that your smart contracts can talk to.
All right. Hope that answered your question. Let's see. We got that one. We got that one. Okay, here we go. This is a little off topic here, but what the hell? How does Hemi utilize AI as part of its development process, and what procedures are in place to ensure code is properly peer reviewed before use?
It's a good question. So depends on what part of the Hemi stack you're talking about, but generally we're using AI for, well, probably one of the more interesting cases is smart contract auditing. So being able to have sort of a first pass of doing security review, looking for bugs, building interesting test cases for smart contracts that there's just not engineering time to, write manually. We're also using it for, or at least I'm using it for the Oxygen Bitcoin indexer. So there's a lot of things that AI is really good at for, figuring out how to structure data correctly. Again, writing a lot of a lot of test cases that, abuse the system and try to find edge cases for. So it's we're using it for development. We're using it for auditing completeness checks, being able to spin up interesting end-to-end integration tests of some of the parts we're building. And then as far as what we're doing from a code quality, code checking perspective, everything that we're writing with AI is human reviewed. It goes through rounds of actual humans taking a look at it, understanding how it works. So we're not, pushing crazy random AI code into production, but we are using it for writing some of the easier parts of some of the things like Oxygen, and then you know going through human review processes to make sure that it code that we do write with AI actually does what we expect it to do.
Here's sort of the funny thing. The best, most surefire way to fuck up a code base with AI happens to be the exact same as the best, most surefire way to fuck up a code base with humans. And that's to write a lot of code, not have tests for it, and not have it reviewed by experts. And it's actually, there's very similar failure modes for both. So a lot of the way we protect ourselves from poorly written human code is the same way we protect ourselves from poorly written AI code.
That makes sense. Um, this actually seems like a good platform for this. Marco, um, is there any information or updates about your ordinal work with MetaMask? And is there anything else you can add to that about why you're doing it, what it could potentially bring to the network, etc.?
Um, Sorry, I had to step away for 5 seconds, but I heard ordinal, so I came running.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah, I was just asking if because this is probably a great platform for it. If you want to just discuss a little more about your ordinal work with MetaMask, um, why you're doing it, what the pros are for the network overall, etc. Anything you want to share on that, because it's a really cool initiative. So
so I let me tell you how I got here. So there's a couple of things that are really important to me. So one of them was actually that we need some real use cases for Hemi. And the ordinal struck me one as interesting. And the reason was that a buddy of mine asked me to help him with a Bitcoin thing. So a good friend asked me for some advice. And I'm not going to be able to give away what it was exactly, but I will at some point once it launches. It was a real use case that a Hemi could cover beautifully. So then I ran into all kinds of limitations, of course, because I wanted to use MetaMask because people are used to MetaMask, and so that didn't work. So I just started, first of all, doing things with ordinals on, in Bitcoin, and from there I wanted to be able to do kind of the same things with even the same ordinals on Hemi. And since we have deep linkage, that would be an amazing combination. I just started putting the whole thing together, added a whole bunch of SegWit codes to TBC so that we could handle ordinals. So it's been a whole saga. Uncovered some bugs along the way. So, and this is actually the important thing about building. I know this is a bit of a sidestep, but when you build stuff is when you find stuff that's broken, right? You can never anticipate what you're going to need tomorrow. So when you write code, you always leave some things behind. There's always some bodies buried somewhere. And this is and this one actually helped fix some real issues that we had. And it's just overall been fun. I mean, building on Hemi is fun because Hemi is fast and all kinds of cool stuff. And I don't even know what else you want me to talk about.
no, that was great. Yeah, I think the more visibility on it, the better. We've already put up a couple announcements, but I mean, it sounds like it could really bring a lot to the table. So hopefully, more folks kind of weaponize behind that.
Well, let me actually just take a second back and talk about what it brings in addition to ordinals. Ordinals are cool and all, but at the end of the day, what this ultimately does that is beneficial to Hemi is that we can use a single wallet, being MetaMask, to move both Bitcoin and Hemi and Ethereum tokens all within the same the same app, and that is a huge plus for all communities, right? Because now you have a unified, you have a single key, and you have all these different networks you can participate in. And again, the deep linkage between Hemi and Bitcoin is very ripe for accelerated application development. So
And just to add another reason why to be real explicit, why that's good. Remember, these wallets are browser extensions. The single weakest security piece on your computer, other than Node.js, is probably your web browser. And one of the biggest problems with that is extensions. So the less extensions you have on your browser, the better the sort of a surface is, or the less the attack surface is. So if you can do everything you want with one browser extension, that's a win.
Right. So, and again, to me, this is all about interoperability. So I actually made it all work with a sidecar to MetaMask. The trick was pretty weak because I was basically making MetaMask sign something. Then I used that signature as a seed to a private key. So it was a bit of a mess, but it worked. So and when I looked at that, I was like, working versus this is the way I would use it was so far off. And that's actually what motivated me to just, let's just get, let's figure out just how bad it is to get this into MetaMask. And it turns out it wasn't that bad at all. They had been doing some work towards it already. So it was just a matter of enabling certain things and adding some additional types. It was not a terrible, it was 4 PRs total, but nothing huge or crazy. So, but if you guys want to push on that, I think they have been put out, right? The 4 PRs that needed to be pushed.
Yeah, anything you told us to link, Joshua and I did. So we've got that announcement out a few times. I can actually link the announcement for folks so they can go in there and start. Well, hopefully not start, but continue to show some love over there.
Right. And then once I get this thing, which I'm building by the way in my spare time, so it's not going at the speed I'd like, but if I get that out the door, then I will share it with the community because I think it actually underscores two things that are amazing, and that is Bitcoin, Bitcoin economics, and what can be done with Bitcoin in the real world. So, but that is a max ultra soon announcement from my end. If I can build it in my spare time.
So quick follow-up question, Marco. With the work you're doing, would it then become possible to transfer Bitcoin ordinals directly onto Hemi?
So no, not quite. So, but the ordinals would live on Bitcoin, but the transfer layer could be Hemi. I have no simple way of explaining this. So
No, that's that's totally
no,
fine.
so the thing is that you need to have the thing exist in one spot where it's real, right? And you cannot have, because the thing you could do, for example, is link an ERC token to an ordinal, but that ultimately is silly, right? So, and this is why I wanted to make that the marriage explicit between you sign on Hemi, but you use Bitcoin as the storage layer. I think Max can put it probably way more eloquent than I can.
I mean, I'll give it a try. There's a So with ordinals, you basically, if you look at like a standard bridge or tunnel architecture, like Marco was saying, you need somewhere where the assets actually live on Bitcoin, and so Bitcoin doesn't have the native features that you need in order to sort of encumber the ownership of a meta protocol asset in some way that can be, validated or controlled by some external network. And so there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with ordinals if you build an economic incentive layer around it. And so you could have, for example, some of the work we're doing for MinerFi could be reused as a way to create what we're calling, smart wallets or uh, whatever you want to call them, but basically wallets that are controlled in a decentralized manner by economically uh, staked participants who, if they misbehave, that can be observed on chain and they can be slashed for it. And eventually, some of their economic stake could be used to make stakeholders in a protocol that they're controlling whole. And so, while you can't, you know, truly move an ordinal from Bitcoin out of Bitcoin and then do stuff, on Hemi with it and then move it back to Bitcoin, you could build a system where you use some sort of like threshold signature scheme, kind of like we're building with MinerFi, and then economically collateralize that so that they are the ones in a decentralized manner holding custody of that asset and then moving it in response to things that happen on the Hemi chain. So if you were to build, say an ordinals DEX or something like that, you can't move the ordinal to the Hemi network in a very fundamental technical sense, but you can build incentivization around a threshold signature scheme system that could hold custody of that asset and then only move it in response to where, say, that on-chain ordinals deck says that asset should be moved. And if they didn't do that properly, they get slashed for more value than the ordinal itself is worth. So there's a lot of the things when you're building on Bitcoin is you can't really. It's very hard to build interoperability technology that works with meta protocols. But if you build economic incentive layers around it, plus some sort of incentivized or disincentivized against misbehavior incentive system, then you can build protocols where you can actually move that asset to some group that controls it, and then they are economically aligned with doing on-chain Bitcoin transactions that transfer that asset appropriately based on what happens on the Hemi L2.
And Max, if I can build onto that. So also when you hear me say, or when you hear Max say ordinal, what really we are saying is a UTXO. So and that is powerful on its own, right? Because if you can move an ordinal, and that's actually why I started there, because they are at least relatively low or cheap to inscribe if you don't make them too big. So once ordinals work, now you can take on amounts. Now you can actually start thinking about moving Bitcoin, because that's what you're fundamentally doing. So an ordinal is at the very bottom is nothing but a UTXO. So if we can move an ordinal, means we can move UTXOs, means we can actually at this point start transferring value. Hey, Max, I did not mean to interrupt. I just wanted to stress that point.
No, all good. Yeah, it's a good thing to bring up. I think there was I saw an interesting question in the chat. I'm trying to find it.
Max, is it if it's ordinal related? I see one from Alex about sign on Hemi and transactions on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that was the one. Yep, just found it.
All right.
Yeah, so sign on Hemi and TX on BTC with the same address. So you wouldn't be able to use the exact same address, but you could use the same private key that corresponds to a Bitcoin address and to a Hemi address. And actually, that's
I
kind
can
of
make that.
similar. Yeah, go for it, Marco.
No, I can make that work. It's not necessarily a good idea, but fundamentally at the very bottom, the a Ethereum key and a Bitcoin key are the same. So they both use the same curve. So they just express them in a different way. So as long as you have the material at the bottom, you can perform all kinds of tricks, and that's actually what got me going on this whole train of making this work. So now, if it's a wise choice, that's a different conversation altogether. Is you probably don't want to reuse addresses for all the reasons that people talk about. One of my favorites is post quantum, which I don't really believe in, but if you have qualms about address reuse and address leakage, then you really shouldn't. But again, that's a different conversation than you couldn't. So, and in fact, we actually pull off a non-dissimilar trick with POP payments, where you have an Ethereum address and you end up being paid on Bitcoin. The other way around, sorry. Max, you want to take it from there?
I don't think there's too much to add to it, but yeah, like Marco said, I was going to bring up the Popminer as sort of an example here, where you have the same private key that controls a Bitcoin address that you're actually using to do the Bitcoin publications, and then you can derive a Ethereum address or an EVM address from that. And so there's a lot of cool stuff you could theoretically do with, same private key, but having a EVM and a Bitcoin address controlled by it. You can actually validate that pretty efficiently on chain. And so Pot mining doesn't use it because the validation's at a lower level in the actual daemon that just looks at the public key that's published on Bitcoin and then uses that to derive a EVM equivalent address. But there is some cool stuff that, depending on your use case, you could do with on-chain validation. Being able to on-chain validate that a Bitcoin address is equivalent to an EVM address, and then having some incentive layer built around that for, if we're talking about meta protocols, so you could prove that this Bitcoin address is controlled by the same private key that's behind this EOA that's interacting with your protocol, and then you could prove that that EOA, again using the HVM precompiles that you have access to, prove that it has ownership of a certain ordinal through, like Mark was saying, the UTXO check or something of that nature. So the you have to do a lot of custom work on the smart contract side currently for validating and tracking meta protocol data, because we don't natively support it in the HVM at the moment. But when we do add HVM meta protocol support, it would make it a lot easier to actually not just have somebody submit a TXID that proves a certain ordinal exists and was moved from address A to address B, and then you could validate that with custom logic on chain, but actually being able to call a precompile that would have access to a view of Bitcoin that is processed and indexed in a way that respects and understands the meta protocol and would be able to actually give you direct access to meta protocol information that you'd normally have to, parse manually in the EVM. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it today, but a lot of the stuff Marco's talking about for kind of on-chain DeFi use cases of meta protocols would be a lot easier to build out with some HVM additions, which is on the radar. It's not a super near-term item because there's a lot of other stuff on the development roadmap that is taking precedence. But once we add that in, it'll make it super easy to build applications that live on the Hemi network but have full, direct, very gas-efficient visibility of meta protocols.
So, and this is actually where you should feel encouraged to start building and start asking us questions on where this is heading or where this can be headed. So when I started working on this, the first thing I did is I actually disturbed poor Max on a Sunday at all hours of the night because I was awake and it was interesting to me. And I asked him, "Hey, what if we did this?" And Max's reaction was, "We need a precompile for that," and that would be great. So, but again, what I'm trying to actually do here is, get to a baseline that we can start building from. So once we have ordinals, runes become, the next thing. Moving UTXOs becomes the next thing, and then starting to think about a true bridge that is fully operational within the Hemi, ecosystem becomes also a thing. So there's all kinds of things that we can start doing once this starts working. So this is way more exciting than it's neat that we are pushing consensus to update the MetaMask stuff. There's a lot hiding here, and this is where you guys really should step up and ask and see what you can do to help in this area. There's a lot of low hanging fruit and there's a lot of super cool stuff that can be built.
All right. I got one more question before we start to wrap things up. Um, from Mudakon, our May Amigo of the month. I'm building a multiplayer game that will let you play as your NFT, Hemi Bros being the example. All vibe coded, so it's not professional, but I'm interested in what capabilities I might explore having the game or certain aspects of it on chain.
That's a good question. So for a lot of gaming use cases, what you want on chain is the economic side of the game. So, having there could be, again, depends what type of game you're building, what it looks like, but the general pattern would be, anything that a user owns. So, you know, weapons or inventory items, whatever, you could have those as NFTs that are held on chain. You wouldn't want the actual, quote unquote game engine to run on chain in most cases. So you'd want to have a sort of off-chain layer for how the game actually works and runs and users interact with it, and then like an on-chain, call it a settlement layer or something like that for how assets, move between users or get created by the protocol in the first place. That then that part lives on chain because things you do on chain takes you have to send a transaction, it takes a while, it has to confirm, and even though it's in the orders of seconds on the Hemi network, that's from a gaming perspective, usually want immediate feedback, immediate things to be happening in the game. So uh, again, depending on what kind of game you're building, there could be some interesting use cases of on-chain randomness. So with Hemi, you do theoretically have access to the Ethereum RANDAO data. So you could use that as a source of randomness if you needed a, truly uninfluenceable, random draw or something for some part of the game mechanics. But it's hard to advise specifically without knowing more about how the game specifically works. But I would focus on, on-chain assets, on-chain asset transfers between users, and then figuring out how to build the game engine that, kind of works around the limitations of confirmation times of doing things on-chain and makes it still a, quote unquote real-time experience.
Identity is another good one.
Yeah,
Identity is a
identity
great.
for sure.
That's like, it's almost too obvious to say, but it's worth saying. Identity is a great thing to keep on chain because, you know, it's exactly the type of thing that is good for, cryptographically provable, but um, I guess high latency, if you want to look at it that way.
Well, so I think that games are actually uniquely positioned to do what crypto is good at. So cryptocurrencies by default are basically digital bearer bonds, right? So you transfer ownership of something which only exists in cyberspace. It does not exist in the meat space. So so if you want to make a game truly fair, where mythical really truly means a single weapon that exists that can do that, then a crypto backing is perfect for that. So now that is obviously not how often these gaming companies want to work because they want to sell the same mythical item multiple times. But that's how it should work if you care about fairness and an enjoyable game. So but always keep the digital bearer bonds analogy in mind because that is what it does at the very bottom.
All right, very good. And let's see. The game he's developing is a multiplayer RPG. I'm excited because MMOs are my favorite type of game, so I'm stoked to see that deployed on Hemi. I'm not seeing any other questions come in right now. So I think we can start to wrap this one up. But I really want to thank everyone for joining us today. And please note that next week's session will be the same day, but it's going to be at 4 p.m. EDT. We're going to have an alternating schedule to these, so that way we can hopefully hit more time zones and make it more accessible to all of our builders and creators. So next week, 4 p.m. EDT. The following week, we're back at 11, and so on and so forth. So thank you all so much for your questions. We'll be accepting questions at any point in the builder channel, beta tester channel, as well as the creative channel. So if those roles interest you, you can inquire with our moderation team how to get them. Um, and yeah, we hope to see you in there. Keep making cool shit. I want to thank the team for their time and especially the community for coming out. And unless anyone has anything, we will see you next week. It
Thanks, everybody.
sounds like we will see you next week. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.